The scream never reached her throat, only her eyes. They were already wide when I opened mine, already filled with something raw that didn't belong in a midnight shift. She stood so close I could feel her breath shake against my cheek, her silhouette trembling like she was bracing for impact. I jerked upright before I even had control of my body. My name is Clara Mayfield. I told myself silently, grounding my mind, holding my breath steady. And nothing in my life prepared me for the terror stamped across that girl's face. Talia's hand shot out and covered my mouth. Not harsh, but desperate. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. Her voice was thin, strangled like it had been scraped across stone before reaching me. Please stay quiet." The room around us felt wrong. Too still, too dark, too heavy for a place that never truly sleeps. A single emergency light burned crookedly in the hallway, its glow slicing a thin line across my floor. The air felt thick, like someone had closed the world around my bed and left us suspended inside it. Talia looked over her shoulder again, fast, jerky, terrified. When she removed her hand from my mouth, her fingers were trembling so violently they brushed against my collarbone. "Ma'am." Her voice cracked. "You can't be here when morning comes." Those words snapped something inside me awake. "Tell me what you mean," I whispered back, keeping my voice so low it barely had shape. She shook her head. Hard. "Not now. Not loud." Her breath hitched. She already signed the papers. That word, she cut through me with a sharp, familiar edge. My sister. My blood turned cold. "If you're still with me right now, just drop a small heart so I know you haven't left this moment." I eased my gaze toward the clipboard hooked at the foot of my bed. There it was. A form I didn't recognize. A signature I did. Her handwriting sat bold at the bottom, claiming authority she had no right to claim. The loops, the angles, every letter pressed down like ownership. A tremor passed through my ribs. Talia leaned closer until her hair brushed the pillow beside my face. She was terrified enough that her entire body shook. "She asked about you," she whispered. Not kindly, not like family. She swallowed, trembling harder. She told the supervisor she needed decisions made before shift change. My lungs felt too tight. She wouldn't tell me what she planned. Talia said, "Only that your chart needed to show certain things. Things that weren't true." Her voice broke again. "You're not confused. You're not declining. You're not." She stopped herself, breathing shallowly. She wanted the notes anyway. A low hum vibrated through the hallway, the kind of hum that warns you something is awake on the other side of a door. Talia stiffened instantly, her breath freezing mid-inhale. "Somebody's coming." Her words barely existed. My heartbeat slowed. Not from calm, but from the kind of clarity that only arrives when danger settles into the room with you. I sat up straighter, listening past the thundering in my chest. The air shifted first, soft, intentional. Then came the sound. Footsteps, heavy enough to belong to someone with authority, slow enough to belong to someone who didn't need to rush, deliberate enough to belong to someone who believed they had already won. Talia pressed her palm against the wall, pushing herself backward into the sliver of darkness beside the linen cabinet. Her breath came out in tiny, controlled bursts. She braced herself like the slightest movement could expose her hiding place. The footsteps grew louder, closer, stopping directly outside my door. Talia's eyes pinned themselves to mine, wide with a fear so pure it could break bone. She didn't speak at first. Her lips just trembled. Then, barely breathing, she forced out the last warning that would carry me into everything that followed. Please don't let them find me in here. The sun hadn't fully risen when I opened my eyes again. A thin strip of pale gold stretched across the far wall, bright enough to reveal what the darkness tried to hide. And for the first time since Talia whispered to me in the night, I understood why she used the word morning like a deadline. Daylight had a way of catching people mid-act. The hallway outside my room was too alive for dawn. Voices low and quick, footsteps hurrying with purpose, carts rolling as if someone had ordered a rush on the entire wing. Not the usual morning bustle. This was something else. Something coordinated. Something done before I could wake up. I pushed myself upright, the ache in my joints stiff but manageable. The quiet in my room felt wrong, like a scene being prepared for an audience that wasn't me. I turned toward the door. That's when I saw it. A crisp, freshly taped sheet hung at eye level, edges still curling from the glue. Transfer summary. Stamped. Dated. Signed. 3 lines down. Bold enough to blind me. Resident is not safe to make her own decisions. But it wasn't the words that stole my breath. It was what the sunrise revealed behind them. 2 more pages, half covered, had slipped under the first, pinned lazily by the tape. In the dimness of night, I wouldn't have noticed, but the gold morning light exposed every line. A pre-filled competency checklist, a relocation authorization with my name typed neatly, a doctor's signature line left empty, waiting, and on the bottom corner of each page, Selena Tyrone, pending guardian, plural, multiple forms, multiple signatures, multiple hands. They had been busy. A nurse I didn't know paused outside my door, glanced at the stack of documents, then at me. Her face tightened like she'd almost swallowed a truth on accident. "They're getting your room ready," she murmured. "You're being moved today." They, not she, not someone. They. She walked off as quickly as she came, as if the sunlight itself might force her to say more. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and reopened the real estate listing. There it was, my house cold and lifeless. Curtains gone. Furniture rearranged. My life scrubbed out. And under the photo, in calm blue letters, vacant. A cold throb moved through my skull. Sunrise didn't soften it. Sunrise sharpened it. A knock pulled my eyes to the doorway. Selena stepped in like she already owned the morning. Her cream coat was pressed, her hair wrapped tight, her lipstick perfect. She looked like a woman arriving to claim what she believed belonged to her. And behind her stood a notary, polished, quiet, holding a leather folder like he'd been briefed hours before dawn. Selena didn't greet me, didn't ask how I slept, didn't acknowledge the papers taped to my door. She went straight to the blinds and lifted them higher. More sunlight spilled into the room, washing over the transfer summary, the pre-filled forms, the signature lines, all the pieces Talia tried to warn me about. In daylight, lies look sloppy. In daylight, collusion looks crowded. "You're up early," Selena said finally, her voice smooth as lotion. "Good. I didn't want to waste time. We have things to sign." She took the transfer summary off the door and slid it into her purse like property she purchased. The notary followed her movements carefully, not watching me, but watching her like he'd already reviewed everything with her before stepping inside. You know these places, she said lightly, lots of paperwork, lots of signatures. I'm trying to make the process easier. Easier for whom? Behind her, in the hallway, the supervisor appeared, clipboard in hand, whispering something to another staff member while glancing repeatedly toward my door. Their heads bent together. Papers shuffled. A pen clicked nervously. Sunrise had exposed all of them. Selina turned to the notary, smoothing her coat like she was preparing for a photo shoot. Well, she said, can we start with the competency acknowledgement? The notary opened his folder, and in the bright honesty of morning, I finally saw the truth. They weren't just planning to move me. They were planning to erase me. The room dropped into silence. Sunrise didn't lie. It never does. Selina's voice faded down the hallway long after she left my room, but the feeling she carried in with her stayed behind, tight, cold, and familiar. It sat on my chest, heavier than the morning sunlight creeping across the floor. I leaned back against the pillows, letting the weight of it press through me, because what she did today, I had felt shadows of it before. Long before the transfer papers. Long before the notary. Before her heels clicked in hallways she never helped clean. People say sibling bonds are simple. Ours never were. I raised her from the time she was 6, back when my own life was supposed to be starting. When Mama died, the child Selina became my responsibility overnight. And I took her in not because anyone asked, but because my heart couldn't imagine letting her fall into the hands of people who didn't know her softness. I carried her through homework sessions that stretched past midnight. I worked 2 jobs to keep clothes on her back, sewing patches into school uniforms when they tore at the knee. I sat in emergency rooms when asthma attacks stole her breath. I stood at school gates when fights broke out, shielding her from the neighborhood chaos that swept through like storms nobody warned us about. She grew up calling me sister in public and mama in private. I fed her, protected her, fought for her. Every inch of my adulthood was carved with her name pressed into the middle. But even back then, love came with conditions. She could hug me one moment, then turn cold the next. She could thank me with tears in her eyes, then demand more before the gratitude dried. A memory rose, sharp, uninvited, of the one time she crossed a line I chose to pretend wasn't a warning. She was 16. I came home from work to see her sitting at the dining table, a pen in her hand, a stack of school forms in front of her. Nothing unusual, until I saw my name scribbled across a permission slip. My name written in her handwriting. I remember the way she laughed, soft and careless, when she realized I'd caught her. I didn't want you to have to rush home from work, she said. It's just a signature. She smiled like it was clever. I forgave her like it was harmless. Now, seeing her signature on forms that stole decisions from me, I understood the truth staring back through time. That small sin had been a seed. Today, I was living under the full-grown tree. A cart rolled past my room, wheels squeaking on the vinyl. A CNA paused to replace a water pitcher on the tray by my bed. She avoided my eyes when she spoke like she had been told to keep things light. They're prepping you for the afternoon, she said softly. Supervisor's orders. I didn't answer. My mind was still inside that house in our old neighborhood, remembering the girl who used to curl against me when thunder shook the windows. The same girl who once begged me not to send her to school without walking her halfway. The same girl I defended when teachers said she was too dramatic, too emotional, too secretive. I thought loving her would shape her into a woman who cared. Instead, it shaped her into a woman who believed love was something she deserved without earning. Footsteps echoed again. Heels this time, steady and practiced. Selena's perfume slipped into the air before she appeared, a soft floral scent I knew she wore only when she wanted to make an impression. She didn't enter my room. She didn't acknowledge me at all. She walked right past, her coat brushing the doorframe lightly. In her hand was a thick envelope, white-sealed, official-looking. She didn't hesitate, didn't look left or right, didn't lower her voice. She handed it directly to the unit supervisor, who met her in the hallway. The label on the envelope faced me as it changed hands. Guardianship packet. The supervisor tucked it under her arm like something routine. The hallway grew still. My heart did not. By mid-afternoon, the hallway had settled into that strange, quiet nursing homes get, busy underneath, but soft on the surface. The kind where staff speak in lowered voices, and nobody pushes their cart too fast. I was sitting in the recliner by the window, trying to understand why my chest felt tight every time Selena's name crossed my mind, when Talia slipped into my room with her badge flipped backward. She didn't stand long, just enough for our eyes to lock. "Come with me," she whispered. There was something trembling in her voice, the same quake I'd heard in the dark hours earlier. She guided me out of the room, down a short hall, and into a narrow alcove tucked between the med room and the old supply closet, a place staff used to cry, breathe, or hide for half a minute. She checked the corners before she spoke. "Miss Clara, I need you to listen. Please." Her breathing was shallow, her hands wringing around each other like they couldn't find a place to rest. I nodded, and she exhaled like she'd been underwater too long. "It started months ago," she said quietly, "before you even moved into this wing." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Your sister, she was different with me at first. Sweet, interested. She'd come by in the evenings, even when she wasn't visiting you. Brought me coffee when she found out I was working doubles. Asked about my classes, my mama, my rent. She remembered details. Nobody remembers details like that unless they want something." Talia's voice cracked, softer now. "It felt good, you know? I'm not ashamed to admit it. I don't have a lot of people checking on me." The confession wasn't dramatic. It wasn't exaggerated. It was honest, the kind that leaves a bruise. She blinked fast, but it changed. Slowly, she'd drop comments about how stressed she was, how hard it was taking care of you, how complicated your finances were. She never said anything bad about you, not at first. She just painted herself like she was carrying everything alone. She twisted her fingers again, then forced them still. And then one day, her jaw tightened. She asked me to write down anything unusual you say. Nothing major, just little notes, like if you seem forgetful or confused. A coldness crawled through my arms, settling under my skin. "That was the first red flag," she said. "You've never been confused with me. Not once." She finally met my eyes. I told her I didn't feel comfortable documenting things that weren't real. She laughed, said it was harmless, said she just needed support because she was trying to get you the right placement. Placement. The word sat heavy between us. I didn't think too much of it at first. Talia continued. "People frame things however they want to get help." But then she started coming more, bringing little gifts, asking more personal questions, hugging me like we were family, her voice lowered to almost nothing. That wasn't kindness. That was grooming. The truth of it landed like a stone. And last week, she whispered, eyes filling as she relived it, she finally told me what she really wanted. The hallway outside hummed with distant movement. A cart rattled several doors down. Somewhere, a phone rang once and stopped. Everything felt too still, like the building itself paused to listen. Talia leaned in closer. She told me she needs you declared incompetent, she said, barely audible. Not because she's worried about you, but because it's the only way she can access your house. The words landed with the kind of quiet violence that makes a person stop breathing for a moment. Talia swallowed hard, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She wants everything, Miss Clara, she whispered, and she said she'd do whatever she had to do to get it. After Talia slipped back into the hallway, I sat on the edge of the bed long enough for the quiet to press into my bones. Her words kept moving through me like a low drumbeat, steady, undeniable, impossible to ignore. I needed something solid to hold on to, something real, something that would tell me I wasn't imagining the ground shifting beneath my feet. I reached for my phone. The listing I had glanced at earlier was still open. I hadn't looked closely. I hadn't had the courage. But now, with Talia's confession ringing in my ears, the truth waited in plain sight. I tapped the first photo. My living room filled the screen. Only it wasn't mine anymore. The sofa I'd chosen 15 years ago, the one Selena spilled hot chocolate on as a teenager, had been pushed against the opposite wall. My family quilt, hand-stitched by Mama, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a cream throw blanket lay folded neatly, crisp, and perfectly staged, the way decorators do when they want to erase the story of who lived there. I swiped to the next picture. My curtains were gone. The floral ones Mama and I sewed together on a Saturday when Selena was still small enough to fall asleep in my lap. They'd been replaced with long white panels, bright and impersonal. The sunlight pouring and looked clean, camera-ready, stripped of everything that made it home. My chest tightened. I slid to the bedroom photo. The room looked like a hotel suite, sterile, polished, staged for someone who had never lived a day there. My dresser was cleared. My rug was replaced. My bedspread, my faded blue one with tiny stitched stars, was gone entirely. A new comforter lay across the bed, white and untouched, as if my whole life had been covered over like a stain nobody wanted to acknowledge. I zoomed in on the nightstand. My Bible was missing. My reading glasses were gone. My framed picture of Mama was nowhere in sight. Every corner of the room had been scrubbed of me. As I scrolled through more photos, the house grew quieter in my mind. Not the kind of quiet that comforts, but the kind that comes after someone has packed up the pieces of your life without asking if you were ready to let go. My phone buzzed suddenly in my hand, jolting me. A text. Miss Clara, is everything all right? Your sister told us you moved permanently. Nina from next door. The message pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat. Moved permanently. Selena had spoken for me again. Not here, not at the facility. Out there, in the life I built, in the community I lived in, around people who had known me for years. She had declared my absence a decision instead of a disappearance. Another message came in from Nina. Your lights were out for days. We thought you were traveling. Your sister was over there a lot. I gripped the phone tighter. Selena hadn't just planned this. She practiced it, rehearsed every piece. made sure my house looked empty long before I realized she was turning it into a shell. A soft shuffle in the hallway pulled my attention. I looked toward the door just as a maintenance worker walked by, rolling a cart of folded sheets. He paused long enough to give me a polite nod. "Morning, Miss Clara," he said. "They asked me to measure your closet. You're moving down to the other wing soon, right?" The words slid over me like cold water. Everyone seemed to know I was leaving, except me. He pushed the cart along, humming softly, unaware of the way my whole body felt pulled inward, wrapped in a loneliness I hadn't known in years. I lifted the phone again. Something on the listing caught my eye. Something I hadn't noticed before. In small gray print beneath the description, listed 3 months ago. 3 months. That was before Selena ever suggested I come rest for a little while. Before she packed my bags with gentle hands. Before she told me the facility was the best option. Before she kissed my cheek and said, "It's only temporary." The truth settled like a stone in my stomach. My house had been put up for sale before I even checked in here. Talia found me again just after lunch, her steps small, careful, like she was measuring the ground before she touched it. The hall was buzzing with early afternoon activity, med rounds, linen changes, the beeping rhythm of machines settling into a pattern. But something in her face didn't match the routine. She motioned toward the alcove again, the same narrow pocket of space she used before. Her hands were shaking. Once we were out of view, she exhaled hard, the breath sounding like it had been trapped in her chest since morning. "I didn't tell you everything," she said quietly. Her eyes were raw, rimmed in red. Not from lack of sleep. This was the kind of redness that came from crying in a place where nobody is supposed to see emotion. "Yesterday, right before your sister brought that notary in, she cornered me behind the med cart." The way she said it made my stomach tighten. She pressed her palms against her thighs, as if grounding herself. "She asked me again to keep an eye on you. She said, if Clara says anything strange, anything at all, you just make a note. Doesn't have to be big." Talia's voice softened at the imitation, but her jaw shook. "I told her you were fine. I told her you didn't repeat yourself, didn't forget details, didn't wander, didn't show any decline. I thought she'd drop it." Her throat tightened. She didn't. The hum of the facility grew louder. Phones ringing, carts rolling, an old man coughing somewhere down the hall. But the alcove felt closed in, almost suffocating, as Talia relived what came next. She leaned closer. Talia continued, smiled like we were sharing a secret, and she said, "I know your supervisor. I know your schedule. Think carefully how you want this to go." Her voice cracked. That was the moment I understood what she really wanted. She rubbed the back of her neck, fingers trembling. "Your sister doesn't want notes about confusion. She wants a record that makes you look like you're slipping. Something she can use to justify decisions you never agreed to." Her breath shuddered, and when I didn't answer her fast enough, she said, "I'm not asking for anything dramatic. Just small observations. Enough to support the paperwork." That word, paperwork, hung in the air like a cold breeze. Talia looked up at me, eyes full of quiet shame. I felt dirty, like she'd put her hands all over the parts of me that still trust people. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, as if the walls themselves had rules against it. I went to the supply closet afterward. She whispered. I tried to breathe, but I couldn't. I cried until my chest hurt. "You remind me of my grandmother." She raised me. She used to hold my hand the way you held mine that night when I told you not to sign anything. Her voice steadied, not strong, but clear. I couldn't help your sister hurt you. I couldn't be part of that. Not for her, not for anybody. Her confessions settled between us with the weight of truth, real truth, not the kind that shifts with convenience. A passing CNA laughed lightly with another staff member just outside the alcove, unaware of the storm unfolding inches away. The ordinary life of the facility continued. Meals served, vitals checked, television chatter rolling from the common room. But Talia's world and mine had tilted into something darker. She swallowed hard. I didn't know how far she was willing to go until I saw the notary come in this morning. That's when I knew it wasn't just talk. She's pushing everything, and she's doing it fast. Talia straightened suddenly, her spine stiffening the way a deer freezes before bolting. She heard it before I did, heels clicking in a steady, deliberate rhythm down the main hall. Selena! Her voice carried ahead of her like perfume. Has the doctor signed off on the transfer yet? Talia's breath hitched. The footsteps drew closer. The rest of the afternoon moved with an uneasy rhythm, the kind that lets you know something is shifting under the floorboards long before you hear it crack. I stayed in my room, pretending to read the same sentence in a magazine over and over, while the hallway filled with the controlled bustle of shift change. Voices lowered. Doors clicked softly. A different kind of tension pressed itself into the building. Right around the time the sun dipped low enough to cast a burnt orange glow across my window, Talia stepped in. She didn't close the door. She didn't whisper. She moved like someone who had made a decision and didn't trust herself to second-guess it. Miss Clara, she said quietly, I'm logging a concern with your evening dose. I'm filing it now. Her tone carried the firmness of someone choosing courage over fear. She walked to the computer on wheels, signed in with a sharp tap of her badge, and began typing. I watched her fingers move, steady, practiced, unshaking for the first time since this all began. I'm reporting a possible adverse response to last night's medication. She said, your vitals have been stable today, but I've documented inconsistencies in how the dose was recorded. I inhaled slowly, letting the information settle. This wasn't a lie. It was a door only a nurse could open. She turned to me. Facility policy requires a temporary off-site medical evaluation anytime there's uncertainty with medication tolerance. Once it's logged, we have to follow through. Nobody can override it, not even your sister. She didn't smile. It wasn't a moment for relief. It was a moment for quiet strategy, the kind older women use when the world corners them, but doesn't know how strong they've grown. A second nurse, Marlene, slipped into the room. She was older, maybe late 50s, with gentle eyes that stayed on me longer than they needed to. She carried a folded sweater. Here, she said softly. It'll be a little cool outside. She draped it over my shoulders like she'd known me for years. Take your time out there. Her voice wavered on the last word. Not fear, not guilt, but recognition. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't pretend not to know. She simply gave me warmth and stepped out quietly. Not villains, just people trapped in someone else's scheme, doing what they could when the moment allowed it. Talia printed the paperwork, the soft rustle of the pages sounding louder than the chatter in the hall. She handed me a pen, and I signed where she pointed. Nothing risky, nothing binding, just consent for a checkup at an urgent care facility. It was the kind of form residents signed every day. "Transport is on the way," she said, her voice still low but steady. "It'll look routine." "This is routine. That's the point." I nodded. Everything inside me felt tight, pulled taut like a thread seconds before snapping. Leaving the building wasn't freedom, just a pause, a breath, a chance to step outside the frame Selena had built for my life. When the transport worker arrived, he greeted me with a warmth that seemed to soften the sharpness in the air. "Evening, Miss Clara," he said. "Ready for a quick ride?" His presence felt safe, neutral, someone untouched by whatever storm waited behind me. Talia walked me to the front doors. She kept her hands clasped, her breathing shallow. "I'll check on things here," she murmured. "Just don't come back alone. Not until the doctor clears you." The doors slid open, and the cool evening air wrapped around me like truth. I stepped into the transport van, settling into the seat. The driver adjusted his mirror and gave me a nod before pulling away from the curb. We were halfway down the driveway when I heard it, heels striking pavement, sharp and frantic. "Selena!" She rushed toward the entrance, her coat flaring behind her, her face twisted with something between panic and anger. The automatic doors parted just as she reached them. She looked up. She saw me leaving, and she realized she'd missed me by seconds. The urgent care clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and winter air, a sharp mix that made the place feel cleaner than the day itself. The driver helped me onto a cushioned chair inside the glass doors, then nodded toward the receptionist with an easy familiarity. Nothing about the place felt threatening. It felt neutral. Neutral was a luxury I hadn't realized I missed. A nurse called my name within minutes. The hallway she led me down was narrow, lined with framed posters about hydration and flu shots. Her pace was steady, her expression unreadable. When she opened the exam room door, the doctor was already inside, mid-50s, graying around the temples, with a calm presence that didn't shift when he looked at me. "Miss Clara Mayfield," he asked. I nodded. "Let's start with some basics," he said, pulling up a stool beside me. His voice held no urgency, no pity, just straightforward intention. He began with simple questions. The date, my full name, my birth year, the address of my home. Each answer left his pen moving without hesitation. Good signs. I could feel it in the quiet approval threading through the room. He ran through orientation checks, short-term recall, pattern recognition. None of it rushed, none of it softened into baby talk the way some medical professionals do with older patients. Every question carried respect. When he finished, he leaned back slightly. "Your cognition is normal," he said. "Orientation, memory, reasoning, all intact." He tapped the page gently. No dementia markers. No behavioral red flags. He glanced at me over his glasses. No decline. The confirmation moved through me like warm light under cold skin. He turned the paper around, almost as if he wanted me to see the words forming beneath his pen. Then he asked it, the question that settled into the center of the room with a strange, steady weight. "Why did they say you were confused?" A softness entered his tone only at the edges. It wasn't disbelief, it was caution. The kind used when someone senses the story is larger than the symptoms. I held his gaze. Because confusion fits what they want, not what's real. His jaw tightened, not dramatically, just enough for me to see he understood exactly what I was saying without me having to say more. He continued with the physical exam, checking vitals, reflexes, balance. Everything passed cleanly. When he helped me sit back down, he didn't write immediately. He let a moment pass, letting the truth settle between us. A medical assistant knocked lightly before entering. She was young, maybe early 30s, with warm eyes that lingered a beat longer than usual. She handed the doctor a chart, then leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "We see families do this sometimes," she whispered. "Don't go back alone." Her words slid into me with a slow chill, not surprising, just confirming what my spirit already knew. She squeezed my shoulder gently before stepping out. The doctor finished, documenting everything with methodical precision. The room felt smaller now, not threatening, but full of information I needed to survive the next steps. When he finally set his pen down, he folded his hands and looked at me the way people do when they're about to deliver a truth that matters. "You're mentally stable, physically steady, fully competent," he said plainly. "Your evaluation leaves no room for doubt on that." I nodded, though fear and relief tangled somewhere deep in my chest. He slid his stool closer. The movement was subtle, but the energy shifted with it. His voice dropped, not low, but firm, each word meant to land exactly where it needed to. "Miss Clara," he said, "this wasn't a medical misunderstanding." His eyes held mine, clear, calm, grounded. This was intentional. The room felt colder suddenly, though he hadn't moved. "You're at risk," he continued. "Not medically. Legally." He paused long enough for the silence to tighten between us. Then he delivered the sentence that changed the direction of everything that came after. "You need legal protection immediately." The urgent care transport dropped me at a small law office tucked beside a pharmacy, modest, quiet, the kind of place people entered when they needed help more than pride. The doctor had insisted, "Don't leave this building without someone on your side," he'd said. So I walked in with the sweater Marlene gave me still wrapped tight around my shoulders. The receptionist took one look at my discharge papers and didn't hesitate. "Have a seat, ma'am. Mr. Rowland will be with you in a moment." Her tone carried something steady, compassion without pity. Within minutes, an elder law attorney stepped out. Mid-40s, tall, with an expression that stayed still even when his eyes didn't. "Miss Mayfield, come with me." His office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. He motioned for me to sit, then pulled a legal pad toward him. "Start from today," he said. "Not the old years. The events that led you into this office." I told him, not fast, not soft, just the truth as it unfolded since the midnight whisper. The forged transfer summary, the staged house photos, the notary walking into my facility like he belonged to the building, the staff who looked sorry without speaking it, and Talia's trembling confession about the pressure Selena placed on her. Roland's pen moved steadily, rarely pausing. Calm attention, focused hands, not a single interruption. When I mentioned the real estate listing labeled vacant, he sat forward, the first sign of a shift in his posture. "Do you still have the listing pulled up?" he asked. I handed him my phone. He studied the photos, his eyes narrowing slightly with each swipe. He paused at the staged bedroom, the one crafted to erase me. "Your sister started preparations early," he said, "far earlier than the transfer paperwork suggests." He opened a file drawer and took out a form. "This isn't random, Ms. Mayfield. It's structured, intentional. Let's put the timeline together. He drew a line across the paper. First event, house staged 3 months ago. Another mark. Second, listing goes live. Another mark. Third, sister initiates relationship building with facility staff. He tapped the pad. Fourth, she manipulates the nurse to document decline that doesn't exist. His pen scraped again. Fifth, she brings in a notary for signatures you never agreed to. And the final mark. Sixth, guardianship packet delivered to the unit supervisor. He looked at the page for a moment, quietly, like a man studying the shape of a crime. This is methodical, he said, and criminal. Something inside my chest pulled tight. Not fear this time, recognition. Someone finally saw the shape of the truth the way I had been forced to feel it. Roland reached for his keyboard and typed quickly. Let me check something. His tone changed, low and controlled. Fast-track competency hearings require court notice. They can't be filed in secrecy. His fingers paused. A small exhale escaped him. Well, he said slowly, your sister tried. My body went still. She filed a petition, he explained. Stated you were confused, unsafe, declining. Claimed you needed immediate guardianship assignment for asset protection. She requested an accelerated hearing. He turned to me. She did not list you as a respondent for notification. The room thinned around us. That alone is grounds for legal action. He added, a family member hiding a competency petition is a serious breach. He clicked another page, eyes narrowing deeper. She also pushed for something else. He turned the monitor so I could see a deposit timestamp, a pending escrow movement. She's trying to close the sale of your home. He stopped typing. His voice dropped lower, colder. Tomorrow morning. The words landed like a stone in water, sinking fast and without forgiveness. Roland didn't waste time. The moment he said tomorrow morning, the air in his office tightened like something invisible had grabbed hold of it. He pushed his chair back, stood, and opened a fresh folder. We're building a record, he said. Not emotion, not memory, evidence. He slid the folder toward me. Everything you can remember, dates, conversations, shifts in behavior, we capture it. Talia arrived 20 minutes later, slipping into the office with her hair pulled into a tight bun, the kind she wore when she needed strength more than comfort. She carried a thin notebook and her phone, clutched as if it contained someone's heartbeat. Roland motioned her to sit. Your testimony is critical, but your documentation, that's the spine of this case. Her hands shook slightly as she opened her notebook. Inside were careful notes, dates, times, short observations she'd written when guilt and fear made her hands move before her courage caught up. Let's start with your first interaction with Miss Tyrone, Roland said. Talia nodded. It was February. She brought me a coffee. I didn't think anything of it then. Roland wrote quickly. She came back the next day. Talia continued. Asked how my nursing classes were going. Told me she admired how young I started in this career. It felt kind. Her voice softened with embarrassment. But then the gifts kept coming. Lunches. Books, she said, might help with stress. Little things. Roland's pen paused. That's called pattern building. Establishing trust. We sat for hours, slowly, painfully reconstructing the truth. It wasn't dramatic. It was detail work, the kind that slices clean because it's so ordinary. We gathered, Texts. Talia showed him how Selena would message her late at night. Just checking in, sis. Hope today wasn't too hard. You deserve people who see your efforts. Emails. Facility correspondence, where Selena had insisted she be updated immediately on any concerns, cognitive or behavioral. Visitor logs. Selena came more often than any relative I had. She logged in even on days she claimed to be traveling. The timestamps told a story she never would have spoken out loud. Listing dates. Roland pulled up the MLS history. Look here, he said. The listing was edited 6 times in the last 2 months. She was preparing buyers before she brought you into the facility. Staff statements. Marlene had written a short note. Resident appears oriented and stable. No confusion noted during my shift. It contradicted 3 entries made under Selena's influence. The nurse's notes. Talia slid them across the table, her handwriting small and tight. These were the days she told me to add something. I didn't, but I wrote down what she asked. Roland read silently. One line made him stop. If she says anything unusual, slip it into the chart. Nobody's checking that close. SD. He looked up at Talia. You kept this. She nodded, eyes damp. I needed proof in case she tried something worse. The room fell into a heavy quiet, a devastating, respectful quiet. Roland collected each piece, sliding them into the folder like stones. Weighty, solid, undeniable. This, he said, closing it carefully, is a pattern of coercion and exploitation. She wasn't hoping you'd decline. She needed you to decline. He stood, moving to his computer, typing fast. I'm drafting an emergency injunction to pause the sale. We can't stop the paperwork yet, but we can slow it long enough to get a court order. Talia wiped her eyes. She threatened me, she said softly. I didn't know who to tell. I didn't want to lose my job. Roland turned to her. You're protected under whistleblower provisions the moment we file. He looked at both of us. But we don't have time. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then froze. Speak of the devil, he muttered. She just touched the escrow account. He clicked rapidly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the update. Unbelievable, he said, jaw tightening. She moved the closing time. He turned the screen toward me. There it was, cold, digital, final. 9 a.m. He faced me fully, urgency sharp in his voice. She just moved the closing to 9 a.m. We need to act tonight. By the time Roland and I returned to the facility, morning had cracked open, but carried none of its usual warmth. 3 state inspection vehicles sat in the parking lot. Nothing flashy, just white sedans with clipped badges on the dashboard. The kind of cars that didn't raise alarms until they were already parked at your door. Inside, the air felt different. No friendliness, no small talk, just a tight professionalism that told everyone something serious was unfolding. 3 inspectors stood near the reception desk, clipped badges visible, clipboards in hand. Their faces were calm, unreadable, trained to see without reacting. They moved as a unit, deliberate, observant, clinical. A supervisor hurried toward them with a nervous smile plastered so tight it seemed to strain her jaw. We're happy to assist with whatever you need, she said, her voice just a little too bright. The lead inspector didn't return the smile. We'll start with resident documentation, he said, then staff logs, then medication records. The supervisor's throat bobbed. Of course. Roland leaned close to me. Inspections like this don't happen on a whim, he murmured. Somebody else complained before we ever showed up. One inspector, a short black woman with steady eyes, caught the shift in the supervisor's posture. "Let's begin," she said, flipping her clipboard open. We followed the group down the hallway. Staff stepped aside quickly, eyes lowered. Everyone looked busy, but their hands moved too fast or too slow. Anxious, unsettled. The building had swallowed secrets for too long, and the weight of being seen now pressed into every corner. In the conference room, papers spread across the table like a crime scene. Transfer summaries, medication logs, incident notes, visitor logs. As the inspectors combed through each sheet, their pens tapped rhythmically, marking discrepancies that tightened the air one by one. "This signature doesn't match the one on file," one inspector noted. "This timestamp overlaps with another staff member's entry." This observation note was copied and pasted from a previous date. Identical wording. Each comment chipped away at the careful image the facility tried to maintain. The supervisor's hands trembled each time she reached for a file. She glanced at us often, Roland calm, me silent, like she recognized exactly why we were there. Another inspector studied a page longer than the rest. "Who added this note?" he asked, lifting it for the room to see. The supervisor paled. I'd have to check the shift roster." Roland's voice stayed cool. "The name is right there." More pages turned. More contradictions surfaced. Selena's influence, her quiet pressure, her manufactured concern, began to unravel in front of neutral, trained eyes. There was no anger in the room, no shouting, just clarity, methodical as rainfall. One inspector stepped aside with me, while the others continued reviewing. His tone softened just slightly. "We've had anonymous complaints about this building for months," he said. "Nothing concrete enough to act on. Until now." His eyes flicked toward the conference table, where documents lay exposed like wounds. "Whoever your advocate is, they brought us the missing pieces." Talia walked into the room, then summoned for clarification. The moment she saw the inspectors, her shoulders straightened. She wasn't trembling today. She stood tall, steady, ready. The lead inspector asked, "Did you ever witness unusual pressure from family regarding Ms. Mayfield's chart?" Talia's voice didn't shake. "Yes." The supervisor closed her eyes briefly, as if bracing for impact. The inspectors continued flipping through files. One paused, brow furrowing as he examined a note written in shaky handwriting. "This says, resident appeared confused, unable to articulate date. Recommend memory placement." He turned a page. This was logged 2 weeks ago. Roland leaned slightly forward. "Show me the date." The inspector turned the sheet toward him. Something cold slid down my spine. The date on the note was clear. Stamped. Verified. Filed. But on that day, I wasn't here. I had been discharged for my medical evaluation. The room went silent. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to dim. The inspector looked at the supervisor, then at Roland, then finally at me. "This note," he said slowly, "documents decline on a day you were not in the building at all." The emergency hearing was scheduled for late afternoon, but the courthouse felt like morning light lived inside it, bright, unforgiving, incapable of hiding anything. Roland walked beside me, with steady steps, carrying the thick folder of evidence we built like armor. I felt the weight of every page in my chest. The courtroom was small, meant for probate and elder cases, not the loud battles people see on television. Wooden benches, soft carpet, a judge who looked like he'd seen more lies than most people could name. Everything inside moved with quiet efficiency, the kind that forces the truth into the open without raising its voice. Selena arrived last. She walked in wearing a slate gray suit and soft pink lipstick, her hair wrapped neatly, her shoulders pulled back like she had rehearsed the posture in a mirror. She nodded politely at the clerk, smiled at the bailiff, then glanced at me with a look so composed it almost passed for sisterly concern. Almost. She took her seat beside her attorney, smoothing her skirt as if preparing for a Sunday interview instead of a hearing that threatened to expose months of calculated deceit. The judge entered, his robe brushing the floor, and everyone rose. Once seated, he picked up the case file and adjusted his glasses. This is an emergency hearing for guardianship petition and property transfer injunction. He said, voice steady. Both sides will have an opportunity to speak. Selena stood first. Her attorney guided her with a light touch to her elbow, and she moved to the front with the confidence of someone who believed the room already leaned in her favor. Your Honor, she began, her voice smooth, rehearsed. I love my sister deeply. I've been concerned about her health for months. She's been declining, forgetting things, getting confused. I only stepped in because I was trying to help her, trying to protect her assets and her safety. She glanced at me briefly, a soft, sympathetic curl to her lips, an expression meant to say, see, I'm being reasonable. Everything I did, she continued, was in her best interest. I never wanted any of this to be adversarial. Roland didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her build her image of a dedicated sibling, let her stack her lies high. Every false layer placed itself neatly on top of the next. When Selena finished, she stepped back with a nod, gentle, composed, the picture of a woman burdened by responsibility. Roland rose. No questions for Miss Tyrone yet, he said. The court should hear from the primary witness. He motioned toward the back. Talia stepped forward. She walked slowly, hands clasped, her scrubs freshly pressed, but her eyes betraying a night without rest. When she stood before the judge, her voice trembled at first. Your Honor, I work at the facility where Ms. Mayfield was placed. She swallowed hard. I was approached by her sister, Ms. Tyrone, several times over the past few months. Selena shifted in her seat, the first crack in her polished exterior. Talia continued, voice steadier now. At first it seemed like kindness. She checked on me, brought me coffee, asked about my school schedule. But then it changed. She started asking me to make notes. Clarify, the judge said. Talia's eyes lifted, brave despite the fear moving beneath them. She wanted me to document confusion, forgetfulness, anything that made her sister look like she was declining. A hush spread across the room. She asked me to put things in Ms. Mayfield's chart that weren't real. Talia said she wanted me to falsify her sister's condition. Roland stepped forward. Your Honor, this testimony aligns with timestamps, staff statements, and facility logs already submitted for review. Selena's attorney rose quickly. Objection. The judge lifted a hand. Overruled. I can hear the witness. Talia inhaled shakily, but her voice didn't break. I was scared. She threatened me. Subtly. She said she knew my supervisor, my schedule. She told me to think carefully. The judge's expression shifted, just enough for the room to feel it. Roland sat down slowly. He knew the weight of that testimony didn't need embellishment. The judge turned his eyes toward me, measured, direct, a moment stretched in the still air. "Ma'am," he said, folding his hands atop the bench, "I want to hear you speak for yourself." When the judge asked me to speak, the courtroom shifted. Not loudly, not visibly. It was something quieter, chairs settling, breath pausing, even the fluorescent lights softening as if the room understood the moment better than the people sitting in it. I stood slowly. My knees didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. All the fear had burned itself out long before I walked into that courthouse. What remained was a steady ache, the kind that sits beneath the ribs and doesn't move. "Your Honor," I said, my voice low, steady. "I raised my sister, not because anyone told me to, because love made it easy." Selena's eyes lifted, her expression unreadable, polished into something almost blank. "I was 16 when I took her in my arms for the first time." I continued. "She was so small she slept on my chest for weeks. I worked nights at a cleaner's and mornings at a diner, so she'd have shoes for school. I paid for her first college class. I cooked her meals, braided her hair, defended her when kids teased her for being quiet. My voice didn't grow louder. It grew closer, intimate, measured, directed at the truth sitting between us. For years, she was the child I carried but never birthed. And for years, she loved me back. But her love came with lines, conditions. I let the words settle, not rushing them. She wanted things, expected things. And every time I didn't give her what she wanted, something inside her bent a little. Selena shifted, but not with guilt, more like discomfort at being seen too clearly. I trusted her with keys to my home, with access to my bills, with my medical forms, because that's what sisters do. We trust each other. The room felt colder, not unfriendly, just honest. And she used that trust, I said, not to help me, but to move me out of my own life. I didn't cry, not one crack in my voice. Talia looked down at her hands, swallowing emotion she'd been holding since the hearing started. She prepared the house before I even walked into that facility. I said, "I didn't know that until today, but she did. She staged my bedroom. She took pictures. She called realtors. She wrote notes in my chart to make me look like I was slipping." The judge's eyebrows tightened. Not shock, recognition. She controlled staff. She pressured nurses. She pushed for decisions I never consented to. And when I didn't decline on my own, she tried to create decline. A faint murmur rippled through the gallery seats. "But the part that hurts," I added softly, "is not the house, not the money, not the petition." My voice lowered even more. "It's that she didn't think my life was still mine." I exhaled slowly. "That's all, Your Honor." I sat. Roland rose immediately, placing the folder on the evidence table. "Your Honor, as the court has heard, the timeline is not just emotional, it is documented." He clicked a remote, and a screen lit behind him. Exhibit C, MLS listing history. Exhibit D, staging photographs dated months before Ms. Mayfield's admission. Exhibit E, guardianship petition filed without notifying the respondent. Exhibit F, facility log entries during the resident's absence. Exhibit G, nurse testimony corroborated by screenshots, timestamps, and supervisor statements. Selena's attorney tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. Counselor, I've reviewed the documents. Continue. Roland stepped aside, letting the images speak. Each photo, each timestamp, each falsified note. The house had been listed before my hospital band even wrapped around my wrist. The forged transfer summary had been sent on a day I wasn't under evaluation. The decline note had been filed while I was physically miles away. The judge tapped his pen once, twice. A long pause. A breath. He leaned forward. "Miss Tyrone," he said, his voice sharp at the edges, "your actions reflect calculated effort, not care." Selena stared straight ahead, the mask finally cracking, the calm slipping at its seams. The judge closed the folder. Given the testimony, evidence, and timeline presented, the room went silent. Everything in me tightened. Guardianship revoked. A beat. Investigation opened. The ruling didn't echo. It didn't need to. It moved through the courthouse like a breeze with weight, quiet, undeniable, shifting everything it touched. Within hours, the legal wheels began turning, each motion steady and precise, nothing rushed, nothing theatrical. Roland filed the injunction with practiced efficiency, his voice calm as he explained each document to the clerk. The court approved the freeze on the property transfer before sunset. By the next morning, the sale of my home no longer existed in any legal reality. It wasn't pending. It wasn't processing. It wasn't waiting for signatures. It was halted, cold, final. The escrow officer emailed Roland directly. Transaction suspended per court order. The words carried a quiet finality that settled in my chest like a reprieve I hadn't realized I needed. Later that same day, my financial accounts, each one Selena had tried to access under the guise of protection, were restored. The bank manager, an older man with silver at his temples, spoke softly when he called. "Miss Mayfield, your access is reinstated. Any prior restrictions were tied to the guardianship filing. That filing has been vacated. You're in full control again." His voice carried no pity, just respect. Another piece returned. In the days that followed, everything she'd pulled loose found its way back to me. The facility, rattled by the state inspection, stood under intense compliance review. Supervisors moved quietly, answering questions from inspectors who returned with follow-up demands. Paperwork was rechecked, notes rewritten, processes evaluated. I became a name whispered in hallways, not with fear, but with the sober kind of reverence people give to someone who has survived something they should never have had to face. By Friday morning, Roland drove me home. The neighborhood looked exactly as I had left it. Lawns trimmed, porch lights glowing soft, the sound of a distant lawnmower humming somewhere behind the houses. My house stood still and familiar, but not untouched. The staging team had rearranged everything months ago, and though it looked polished, it didn't look like me. My keys shook in my hand, not from weakness, but from the weight of walking back into a life someone else had tried to rewrite. The door opened with a slow groan. Inside, the air carried faint traces of lemon polish and artificial linen spray. Pictures were straightened too perfectly, throws folded too neatly. My favorite mug missing from the kitchen counter. A life rearranged for strangers instead of lived in by the woman who owned it. I stepped deeper inside. each footfall reclaiming a piece of ground I didn't know I'd been fighting for. Roland stood by the doorway, giving me space. "You take your time," he said quietly. "This is your home. Every part of it." When he left, silence settled, not empty but comforting. Home didn't feel lost. It felt patient, waiting for me. A soft knock sounded around noon. I opened the door to find Talia standing there, holding a bouquet of fresh lilies, white, elegant, almost shimmering in the sunlight. Her eyes were brighter today, relieved, but vulnerable in the way only someone who has carried a secret too long can be. She exhaled shakily. "I wanted to see if you were okay." I stepped aside, letting her in. She set the flowers on my table, touching the vase with a tenderness she didn't bother hiding. I kept thinking about how scared I was. And then I realized, she swallowed, voice tightening with truth. "You saved me too. If she had gotten away with all of this, I would have been the one blamed for the notes. My license, everything. You spoke up for yourself, and it protected me." Her words pressed something warm against the ache inside me. "Thank you," she whispered. We sat for a while, no small talk, no forced brightness. Just two women breathing in the quiet truth that survival sometimes comes in pairs. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across my living room when I heard the mailbox clang shut. I walked outside. Inside was a single certified letter, stamped in bold red. Official notice, pending charges. Word traveled through the neighborhood long before I stepped outside my front door. Not loudly, not through gossip. It moved the way truth always does when it's been buried too long. Quiet, steady, undeniable. By the next week, the community center agreed to host a meeting. Not a confrontation, not a spectacle, a space for clarity. I arrived with Roland and Talia by my side. The center smelled like polished floors and old coffee, the kind of scent that lived in buildings where people came together to settle things with dignity. Chairs were arranged in a neat circle, no podium, no spotlight, just seats facing one another the way truth prefers. Neighbors filled the room one by one. Mrs. Donahue from across the street, Mr. Lewis, who always waved from his porch, the couple who jogged past my house every morning, and a few people who had only nodded hello before all this. Their faces held a mix of shame, curiosity, and quiet remorse. They avoided my eyes until they were ready to meet them. Selena arrived late. She slipped in through the side door, wearing a plain coat. No makeup, no polished calm. She didn't sit. She lingered near the back wall, arms crossed, eyes lowered. The air around her felt tight, as if she had walked in expecting a battle she could still win. The facilitator, a calm older woman with silver bracelets, opened the meeting with a simple sentence: "We're here to let truth settle where it needs to settle." Nothing more. Roland spoke first, not as a lawyer performing, but as a witness presenting facts with clean lines and no dramatic edges. He explained the guardianship petition, the forged notes, the falsified decline entries, the attempted property sale, the state inspection findings. He spoke the same way the judge had ruled. Firm, clear, not cruel. Documents passed from hand to hand. Screenshots. Timestamps. Facility statements. The MLS listing dated before my admission. Every page moved slowly around the circle, each person pausing long enough to absorb what they had never questioned. The room stayed quiet. No gasps. No anger. Just the slow realization of what happens when trust is weaponized. Talia spoke next. Her voice wavered only at the beginning. I was scared, she admitted, but fear doesn't erase the truth. She recounted the pressure, the grooming disguised as kindness, the subtle threats. Her words fell softly, but landed heavy. When she finished, she sat down with her hands folded tight in her lap. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Then a neighbor, Mr. Lewis, cleared his throat. He looked straight at me, guilt sitting openly in his expression. I'm sorry, he said. I believed her. She told us you'd moved out permanently. She said you weren't yourself anymore. I didn't question it. I should have checked on you myself. His apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. It was real. And it restored something I didn't know had been bruised. A few others echoed similar words, quiet acknowledgments, simple but heartfelt. Each one loosened the tightness that had settled in my chest during the months of being spoken for instead of spoken to. I didn't respond with speeches or explanations. I nodded. That was all. Truth didn't need a performance. When the facilitator asked if I wanted to say anything before we closed, I stood slowly. I'm home now, I said, and I intend to stay there. The room absorbed the sentence with a gentle hum of agreement. The meeting ended without applause. People approached me softly, some squeezing my hand, some offering short blessings, some simply nodding with a kind of respect I had earned the hard way. Selena never moved from the back corner. She watched the room empty, shrinking into her coat, as if it were the last barrier she could hide behind. Her silence wasn't strength this time. It was consequence. Roland walked me outside. The late afternoon sun stretched long across the sidewalk, warm enough to soften the edges of everything that had happened. When I reached my front door, the key turned smoothly in the lock. The house breathed around me. My furniture, my air, my life returned. I stepped inside. The sunlight dusted the floor in a soft, golden sheet. Behind me, through the closing gap of the door, I saw her, Selena, standing on the walkway with nothing left to take. Not my house, not my dignity, not my name. The door clicked shut. Quiet, final.